head off. The coordinators talk tomorrow. Do they fly tomorrow night? Is that right?
I thought it was tomorrow afternoon. I could be wrong. I thought it was
okay.
like maybe it's late afternoon. But yes, at some point tomorrow, after practices take place and meetings and all that crap.
And then they'll have to, take on Tyreek Hill, and we'll have to find out if they can slow him down like they did Justin Jefferson or any other people.
I'm getting more excited for the game.
It's a massive game. I can't blame you for being excited for it. It's huge.
It's not just that it's a great matchup. I mean, these are two of the best teams in the AFC. But the Germany element is cool. Like, we've all seen the international games recently. I know the Chiefs played lastly in London against Detroit many, many years ago. But seeing the whole crowd sing Sweet Caroline, or what was it last year when Brady was there with the Bucs, just seeing these atmospheres and obviously all the different jerseys, but knowing that, as we briefly mentioned yesterday, like when you play in Germany and if you're the Chiefs and you've been one of the best teams in football for the last 5 years, if not the best, and you have the best quarterback, and just knowing that the fan base and like how cool it is, we're going to have someone on from Germany tomorrow, but like how cool it is knowing that like in Kansas City and here in the United States, how much notoriety the city has increased or gained, I should say, based off the draft and the Chiefs and heck, even the Taylor Swift stuff going on and all that. And then now on an international level, if you're a football fan in Germany, there's a very good chance you're a fan of the Kansas City Chiefs.
I mean, you could randomly choose other teams, but because they're only limiting these teams to watching certain amount or like being able to advertise certain amount of teams, yeah, the Chiefs have a massive foothold in the Germany experience, especially because they are the far better team. I mean, because, again, it's just them and the Patriots right now. In some of these markets, it would seem unlikely that, they're going to get overtaken by that squad.
You guys can hit us up on the Jay's Southland Tow Service text line 913-586-7610. We know the trade deadline has gone and passed at this point, and no wide receivers traded to Kansas City, no moves by Kansas City. In fact, only one wide receiver traded at all. Donovan Peoples-Jones, 6th-round pick from the Browns, goes to his hometown team, by the way.
Not even Richie James.
And the Detroit Lions, not even Richie James. So I know there's a lot of frustration. We all were discussing in the 1 o'clock hour yesterday about them not making a move. We don't have to go over it again. I didn't expect it. You didn't expect a move. We went through why we believe it didn't happen. I know there's a lot of people that feel like the Chiefs should have been far more desperate. We're going to all find out as the season goes on based off of who they have in the wide receiver room, if there is any improvement. But I thought Nate Taylor's comment yesterday in the 1 o'clock hour about this rotation at wide receiver was interesting. I think you asked the question just kind of where things were at, but also he brought up Matt Nagy. We all know it's his first year as being the offensive coordinator, and Eric Bieniemy is now the OC.
First year is back as the offensive coordinator.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. First year as the OC with this team.
He's been the OC here before.
Right, but it's his first year as the OC. Yeah. But point being, that he brought up that he thinks if Eric Bieniemy was the OC still, that already the wide receiver room rotation would have whittled down. And he says Matt Nagy has done that in other areas, but not wide receiver. Well, that's a problem. That's a mistake. Like
I think he wanted maximum evidence.
I mean, this is why I still think it's post bye week that we really, really see it. I mean, some of it is their hand is going to be forced on it here pretty soon, right? I mean,
yes,
like to a certain extent. I mean, Justin Ross is no longer part of the equation, so that you can stop with that. McCole Hardman is working into that room. Justin Watson is someone that should continue to get opportunities, and they should whittle the rotation. I'm not telling you for Sky Moore to not play a single snap. That's not what I'm saying. That'd be foolish, right?
Saying more snaps for other people and less for him.
Absolutely. So I hope at some point, and maybe it's this week, I think it's post-bye week, you got to narrow this thing down in the wide receiver room to give some guys some opportunities and the right guys opportunities.
I think the biggest concern for me was Albert Breer's piece less than 48 hours ago in the lead up, maybe a day before, day and a half before the trade deadline, when it was like, hey, nobody's expecting the Chiefs to make a move. They're planning on the continued development of second-round players, Rashee Rice and Sky Moore. Look, I'm with you halfway. You had me at Rashee Rice's continued development. You lost me at Sky Moore's. This is no longer, and I think this is what you were talking about when you had mentioned the word bust with Sky Moore.
Right.
This is no longer a conversation of maybe he just needs a little more time, including the postseason. Sky Moore has practically played 2 full seasons for you. Like, I'll be honest, this is not like a small sample size of games anymore for him. He's played in 24 regular season games and 3 more in the postseason, Gold. He's played in 27 football games for you. And in those games, he's averaging like 15, 16 yards a game. I think we've got a pretty good indicator that the continued development of Sky Moore isn't going to happen, and that you're better off just going with maybe, in your opinion, less talented players if you're the Chiefs or whatever it is, and riding the coattails of Rashee Rice and MVS and McCole Hardman and the guys at least you know in their career. Because McCole Hardman, as much as maybe we didn't love his time here in Kansas City, when he was a full-time player for this team, he averaged double the yards per game that Sky Moore is averaging his career. So he's been a more productive player.
This was the conversation I mentioned with Nate Taylor yesterday on the show about the wide receiver room and some of the decisions that are being made.
But you gotta start making decisions. And one of the things that I feel like, as much as people talk about the difference between, hey, this is a Matt Nagy-led offense versus a Eric Bieniemy-led offense, is Eric Bieniemy would have made decisions by now. And Nagy has still let it be a more wide receiver by committee. But at halftime on Sunday in Germany is literally the halfway point of the season. And they should make, in my opinion, decisions on that position group.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people that probably said it should have been done weeks ago. But now it has to, whether it's Sunday or whether it's in the bye week. If now that you know this is the group, I mean, there's no doubt anymore. This is the group that you are going to battle with the rest of the season. There's no, week 2 and week 3, you could say, well, if things continue in a certain direction, or if the Bucks fall off or whatever, maybe you bring in Mike Evans or so. This is the room you got. You got to make it work. Your job as a head coach and as an offensive coordinator is to make the personnel fit your scheme as well, right? Or the guys that at least can help your scheme succeed the most. And you maybe weren't sure who could do that. Clearly, if you're having 6 or 7 guys, by now you've had 8 games, soon to be 9 games of seeing it. It's time to whittle down the rotation a little bit. If you're telling us that you believe in this room still because you did not go out and make moves, well, then you got to make some adjustments. I have no problem that they didn't go out and make a move yesterday. I've told you that because I look at where they were with the cap, and no other wide receivers other than Donovan Peoples-Jones got traded. I saw a report even out of New York. Some Jets fans were wondering about their situation. And there was a report that said the Jets did call around on Mike Evans and Devontae Adams.
Really
and
guess trying what? To load up and for guess what? Zach Wilson.
And guess what that report? That's out of New York. That's not Kansas City. This is out of New York. And the reporter there said what he heard was that teams were not willing to trade their top wide receivers. We have this assumption that, Cody, I can pick up the phone and I can call anybody and I can say, I want blank, and that they're just always going to say yes, and there's always a deal to be made. Sometimes the other team doesn't want to trade a player.
I mean, at this point, you have to hope.
They got to be available. Like, I'm not saying that you shouldn't be proactive and make calls, and who's to say the Chiefs didn't make calls, but the other team has to be willing to play along, right? It takes 2 to tango with trades, and that wasn't just a Chiefs problem yesterday, if you think it was a problem. Other teams called about the same names that people had mentioned here for a while. They weren't available.
I think that there's probably, and I think this is important, there has got to be a part of, if you're a member of the Chiefs organization versus you're a fan or you're us or whatever, if you're a member of the Chiefs organization and you're really staring down the barrel and you're like, okay, yeah, we know our wide receivers aren't really good enough, right? MVS is still leading our team in snaps. Sky Moore is second and getting no production. Rashee Rice, he's still 100 snaps behind Sky Moore in the season, but we can just safely assume that'll be at least flipped for the second half of the year. You know what would be really tough in that situation, Gold? Is that you are the defending Super Bowl champions, and halfway through the season, you're the number 1 seed in the AFC. Do you understand why an organization wouldn't feel the need to panic in that exact moment? And I think a lot of what gets us hung up on here is they're winning different than we're used to, and so we don't believe it's real. Does that make sense? They're winning because of their defense way more often. Not like the one-off game we might talk of from previous years. Go to be like, wow, they won that game because of their defense. Cool. That was the one time in all of 2021. This year, they've won way more games because of their defense and their offense. And it's hard to imagine that you could just be like, well, we had an option. And the way we spent our free agency money and our draft picks over the last couple of years, where we were going to get better. We chose to spend all those resources on getting better on defense. And to be honest, it clearly worked. They're a top 5 defense in the NFL. Spending those resources worked. As a result of that, they've gotten worse at wide receiver. They don't have a guy like Tyreek Hill anymore. And they're still, now points per game wise, that's going to have to improve. They're 12th in the NFL right now. all the other advanced metrics say that it's pretty much just like red zone stuff causing the problems, because in yards per play, yards per game, all the other ancillary statistics, it would say the Chiefs are still a top 5 offense.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong, there's stuff that's broken with this offense. I mean, that's not trying to act like everything's cool and good. There are things that they have got to fix, and that's where you, I think, should be able to put enough faith in your head coach and your quarterback and even your offensive coordinator, Matt Nagy, and feel like they can get this figured out. So nobody's saying that there aren't problems. But, man, I think if you're not going to trust this coaching staff to figure it out, then there's no coaching staff in the league you would ever trust. I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. I mean, Andy Reid is one of the most creative offensive minds we've ever seen in the game, and Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. If you don't believe they can figure it out, then that means you think this is something that no team could figure it out. Maybe that's your stance. That's fine. We're going to all find out as the season goes on. And I agree with this text, from the 816 that says, hey, people were so high on Richie James this offseason. I definitely was. Why not see what? Why not
Gold,
see?
you still have all your stock available. Remember, it's not. You can't sell it now. No one's buying.
Nobody's buying it. But I really thought Richie James was going to have like 650 yards for this team. Someone says, why not see what he can do? That is true. Like, if you're going to tell me,
if he's on the roster, absolutely.
If you're going to say yesterday, we saw this a lot. If you're going to say that anybody would be better than what they're throwing out there, if that was your stance yesterday, then shouldn't your stance also be then that Richie James should just get more opportunity coming off of an injury now? Like, if you're saying anybody on the field is better, well, you got someone in-house that did have 600-something yards last year with Daniel Jones and the New York Giants. So why not see if he's part of the solution? I don't know, by the way. I'm not telling you he is. I, coming into the season, thought he could be a factor. The first 2 games of the season, he barely could get on the field. Well, we've seen the guys that have got on the field, and the production's not there. So I would not hate giving it a go with Richie James, but the reports were that they were willing to shop him yesterday, and they couldn't find a suitor. So.
But if he's on the roster, there's absolutely no reason not to find out.
Sure.
I know this sounds bad because, like, we're talking about the, like, hey, nobody. But at this point, based on production, it would honestly be kind of hard to be worse. Like, if you gave almost any other wide receiver 330 snaps over the next 8 games, it would be hard, genuinely hard, as a wide receiver to be less productive than Sky Moore was in those 8 games.
In-house, I agree. I think we have the assumption that someone can come off the street and jump in the system.
No, but with Richie James' case.
In-house, I'm with you. This was my pushback on, hey, just go trade for some other team's 5th wide receiver and he'll be better. Like,
by the way, does Tony just stink? Just real quick. Does Tony just stink? Is he just a bad player? Is that what we determined? I'm serious. I'm seriously asking. I'm not trying to bury the guy, but he can't get on the field either. His snaps are way down.
I'll be honest. I don't know the answer to that. Like, I think the ability is there, but
you think it's possible he stinks now?
I don't think you would have said that last year.
No, I don't think he stinks.
He was limited last year. It was just flashes, right? All we were asking for was 11 snaps a game and to look cool in 2 of them. He was fine at that. I guess I just kind of thought maybe we were going to be way past that by this year.
He's just not even getting on the field anymore, though.
I know. He's playing like 30% of the snaps. Yeah, it's a way low number.
Like not even getting on the field. We'll talk more about this throughout the show and get back to wide receivers a little bit later on. Yesterday, Clark Hunt, of course, did speak a lot about Germany, right, and the opportunity. He's been on the international committee for the NFL for a long time. He's been an advocate of playing international games. Obviously, the Germany market is one of the markets the Chiefs own, for a lack of a better term. They're one of the teams that are allowed to go out and market there. Great opportunity for them. I know Kling's heading out later this week, going to be there in Germany. Obviously, the Chiefs Radio Network excited to check in with Kling maybe on Friday when he's in Frankfurt. We'll have someone on from Germany tomorrow as well that covers the Chiefs there and to kind of get the interesting perspective of what's going on in that country around the Chiefs and in Frankfurt and all the stuff that's taken place there. But he also was asked, Clark Hunt was, about the stadium and Arrowhead Stadium in the future, where so much of the attention has been on the Royals' plan and the deadline that was like September 20-something to select a site. And here we are. It's November 1st today, by the way.
Pretty close. And well, they did before that deadline came up, be like, yeah, it ain't happening.
And April is the target for a ballot, and at some point that gets more and more challenging as the day goes on. But here's what Clark Hunt had to say. He reiterated renovating Arrowhead is kind of where they stand.
Our priority continues to be trying to figure out a way to renovate Arrowhead Stadium and extend its life. We've been in communication with the Royals, and we've been waiting for them to make a decision as to whether they're going to stay in Jackson County or whether they're going to go to Clay County. And once they make that decision, that will help us with our process as we move forward. But our thinking hasn't changed. I'm sorry to say we haven't made a lot of progress, since the beginning of the season. But it is something that we're focused on.
I know you and I have gone back and forth a lot about how the Royals have taken all the arrows in this, and they have. But I do believe they are waiting to see what the Royals do, because that will impact how they're able to approach and what they're going to ask Jackson County for.
Yeah.
So, I mean, as much as you can say, well, they're not really doing anything, I think, as he said, admittedly, they haven't made much progress because the Royals haven't made the progress that everybody else had.
Part of this is because you're the big dog on the street. You could help these by having your conversations with Jackson County at the same time.
I disagree.
I think because here's a huge part of this problem, is that they are asking for different lengths of term.
Yeah.
That's a huge issue that the Chiefs have to be involved in now.
But you can't
just come in later and be like, oh, we want to be in it for 15 less years.
Yeah, but you can't have the discussions fully because if the Royals decide to go to Clay County, that opens everything up for you. And Jackson County is not on the hook for anything related to baseball anymore. And if they stay in Jackson County and go downtown and the Royals are on the 3/8 cent sales tax and they're on, let's say it's a 40-year lease, well, that really impacts what you potentially can ask for. And certainly, worst case scenario, if somehow everything falls apart and the Royals just stay at the Truman Sports Complex and everything was just a mess, then you
the Chiefs should be looking in Kansas.
Then you might be looking to head over to Kansas and calling up Governor Laura Kelly or something.
But you don't have to let the Royals control your entire decision making. You can be a part of your own decision making.
Well, they can't force the Royals out, so I disagree.
No, but they can lobby Jackson County and be a part of these conversations and give them an idea of what they might be asking for, so that Jackson County isn't trying to negotiate with the Royals blind while also guessing about what the Chiefs might be asking for down the road.
I don't think they're guessing. You may not be happy that publicly they haven't said what you're wanting to say, I guess, but I disagree. I don't think Jackson County is saying, hey man, we know the Chiefs need to start talking to us more. They recognize that what's going on with the Royals could seriously jeopardize the chances of the Chiefs staying in Jackson County, yes. But I don't think the Chiefs can finalize any plans until the Royals get their you-know-what together, and they clearly haven't been able to for a lot of different reasons. Here's what Clark Hunt had. You brought up the lease. Yeah. This is what Clark Hunt had to say about a shorter-term lease versus what the Royals want.
I have heard that the Royals are focused on a longer lease, which I think makes sense, particularly if they're in a new building. For us, if we go the renovation route, we really think the shorter lease is more appropriate. Arrowhead's 51 plus years old at this point already, and would be talking about a lease that wouldn't start for 5-6 years from now. So 25 really we think would be a better fit for us. That if the Royals do decide to stay in Jackson County, that's going to be an issue that we've got to resolve. We've got to figure out how to make that work for both teams.
That part is what's interesting, and that's the part that I don't like.
No.
And it has to do with the lease terms. And if the Royals are wanting 40 years and the Chiefs are saying 25, and the plan and the preference is to renovate and not build a new stadium, so you're going to spend $1 billion plus on a renovation, and then on a 25-year lease. At that point, you know what happens after 25 years.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to once again ask Jackson County for money for a new stadium.
Yes.
So the stadium that will then be 70-something years old, but it's not. In the same answer, Clark Hunt said, we want to do a shorter-term lease because, the stadium's already 51 years old, and by the time the new lease starts, it'll be, 55 or 56 years old. So he's acknowledging that basically it's a very old stadium, so we can't do a long-term lease because it's really old, but we can do a Band-Aid 25-year renovation and then come back and ask taxpayers again for money in 25 years?
I hate it. This is the thing I hated the most out of any of his comments, and it is very unfair what is being asked here. Because the biggest problem people have with publicly funded stadiums, this is like the worst version of it. Clark Hunt is essentially admitting what we all know. He loves the stadium because no one loves Arrowhead more than the Hunt family. It was built by the Hunt family. They are very attached to it.
A lot of history for them.
A lot of history for them. For us, it is a great building. But the fans are generally what makes the stadium great. As a result of this, you're saying you want us to fund $1 billion in stadium renovations just so you can enjoy your thing a little longer. You're not saying it'll last forever. You're not saying you're planning on it being Lambeau or Wrigley. You're saying, hey, can you buy me a couple more decades to enjoy the thing my dad built? And then I'll ask you in 25 years for more money. That's an absurd ask. If you're asking for the money, you just got to build new.
Well, I also
to
just
ask us to fund just to keep it for a little bit, that seems completely unfair.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of this is right now, while you have Patrick Mahomes, while you're winning Super Bowls and all, isn't now the time to go and think big?
Yeah,
and
I think so.
And you will have people that will still take issue, obviously, with the publicly financed aspect of any of these projects. But if you're wanting to think big and build your dream palace, if you will, isn't this the time to possibly be able to do it, whether it's in Jackson County or across the state line? Now, to me, would be the easiest time to ever get that done versus 25 years from now. Mahomes is retired. Spoiler, he'll be retired in 25 years. At that point in time, I guess it's a view that it's not your problem anymore because it's somebody else in your family in charge. I don't know. It's bizarre to me.
He doesn't want to be the person to take down Arrowhead, and I understand that, but publicly funding $1 billion just because you don't want to be the bad guy is not fair. That's not a fair ask. If what you're thinking is down the road, 25 years from now, you want the short lease, right? You want 20, 25 years.
Also, is it paid? Does the financial end make any sense? Not even for the taxpayer. I just mean for the does it add up? If you're going to do, let's just say a $1 billion+ renovation, and it's on a short 25-year lease, and this gets back to the article from the Star a week ago, where inflation is going to change all these numbers over time. We all know that, and the sales tax will be worth quote unquote more in 10 years, or income from the sales tax, revenue from the sales tax will be more in 10 years than it is now, just based off of inflation and population, and yada yada. But does the math even add up to where in 25 is the renovation going to be paid off at that point?
Presumably, but again, you know how this works. They get to the end of this thing, they could extend a few years and then buy themselves the new stadium. But it's just he is talking. The thing in this clip is he is talking like he knows Arrowhead has to come down one time. For as much as people try to give the Royals a hard time because they talked about the stadium as in eventually it was going to fall apart, the timelines might be different, but the Chiefs are admitting the same thing the Royals are asking for a downtown stadium for, which is Kaufman can't live forever. Look, they didn't use the term concrete cancer, but Clark Hunt is saying the same things. He's saying, look, this stadium's already old. 25 years from now, it's going to be really old. And it's then why? Then why now would we invest this? If you're going to ask for more money 25 years from now, and by the way, I understand how this works. If the Chiefs got a brand new stadium, in about 5 to 7 years, probably, they would ask for renovation money. I know for a few $100 million. It's every stadium deal.
That's how it all works.
I am I'm not even trying to pretend that part of the argument isn't here, and that's not even the thing that upsets me. It's just that, you're kind of admitting you don't think it needs to be here.
Yeah, you and I have disagreed a lot on the whole stadium stuff. You and I are in lockstep on this, which is that it doesn't make any sense to just renovate a 50-plus-year-old stadium. It just doesn't. And
especially when you don't think it's going to last 150
right.
years. We're renovating, and your plan is to make it one of the two historic stadiums in football. Maybe we're having a different conversation.
Well, yeah, if there's some contract that basically says that no, we're agreeing to after this 25-year lease, we're going to sign a new lease, but we're going to renovate somehow this building, keep it going. And yeah, you're referencing Lambeau, right? Which I'm excited.
That's really the only football stadium.
I'm excited to go to Lambeau here in a month or so. I've never been. They've always been praised for keeping the historic aspect of Lambeau while renovating, right? We've heard that time and time again. In fact, before the last round of renovations for Arrowhead, I believe Clark Hunt and a group went up to Lambeau to check out how they renovated and kept their building historical. But Lambeau has that historical feel. It's a big reason why I'm going to, not because I want to freeze my ass off in Green Bay, Wisconsin. It's because I think it's one of those bucket list stadiums in the NFL, right? In sports, period.
But it might be the only one in football. This is different for... this is way different for baseball, in my opinion. In football, just because of the general shape, there's nothing, you know what I'm saying? The uniqueness part of it is very rare.
We'll talk more about this a little bit later on in the show. Coming up next, though, when we've seen these worst type of losses in Andy Reid's time as the head coach, there hasn't been that snowball effect. Can they avoid that again? We'll get to that. Plus the latest on the Las Vegas Raiders, who just made another move after everything going down overnight. We'll get to that next on Cody and Gold.
Chiefs fans, it's Scott Moore. Don't miss
injury update today from Andy Reid. Willie Gay and Jerick McKinnon did not practice today. It's a groin injury for McKinnon. It's that tailbone injury for Willie Gay. There was a follow-up question at one point asking Andy, hey, are you worried that maybe you'd have to put Willie Gay on IR? And he said no, basically.
I didn't know they needed to be asked, though, which was the concerning
They didn't think so. They didn't want to commit one way or the other fully. But that was a little concerning just to hear that maybe someone had heard something already to suggest that might need it. We know they did sign Darius Harris from the Raiders practice squad. That's where things stand injury-wise. Other than that, everybody else is healthy. Mahomes, no more flu. Doesn't sound like they're worried about the hand that got scraped up or gashed or whatever on Sunday.
Being particularly thankful you have Leo Chanel now, of course, and the Drew Tranquil signing from the beginning obviously helped you. But yeah, you can only lose so many linebackers before the depth you had at the position is gone. They're there now, but at least the injuries are happening now, if I'm ever looking at the bright side. So if Willie Gay had to miss a few games, better now than later. Same thing applies. Obviously, I don't want Willie Gay and no Jerick McKinnon in Germany. We'll find out more, I guess, tomorrow. Although something tells me, seeing how they're traveling tomorrow, we won't get much of an injury update then. Next up on What's Trending, World Series Game 5 tonight. Rangers got Game 4 11-7. They lead the series 3-1. They can wrap up this series tonight against the Diamondbacks. They were down 3-1 in the NLCS Gold and managed to fight their way back. But I got to be honest, they look outmatched. The Rangers are the better team. Corey Seager's likely to win MVP, kind of no matter how this series ends at this point.
Yesterday.
Yep, and a big one early in the game. So my guess is that the Rangers will probably wrap this thing up tonight, if not in Game 6.
Out in Las Vegas, we just mentioned this a little while ago. Of course, the Raiders firing their head coach, Josh McDaniels, also their general manager, their offensive coordinator, naming a new quarterback, Aiden O'Connell.
Quite the day for the Raiders.
A lot of stuff going on out in Las Vegas for a team that continues to kind of just be in the same spot they've been for 20-something years. Poor coach hires, poor GM hires. Derek Carr was an MVP candidate at one point, but again, just a lot of mistakes, and I think it all starts at the top, honestly, with ownership sucks.
Yep, that's pretty much the beginning of it. But they've made a lot of very bad decisions in a row, and that has obviously cost them. You have to go back to the Gruden thing. The initial report is that they didn't want to fire Gruden, but the second that those emails got leaked, he didn't have a choice. He wanted to stick it out with Gruden, and he couldn't because of those leaked emails. I have no idea how the rest of that lawsuit's going to shake out. Still feels like Gruden's got a pretty good argument on that end. Next up on What's Trending, there's a couple of other pieces of NFL news floating around. Eagles add Julio Jones to their active roster, so he'll be available to play for him this Sunday. And Taylor Heineke, the new starter in Atlanta. They're currently tied for first place in the NFC South at 4-4. They have the tiebreaker, although it's 8 weeks in, so not very important. Taylor Heineke, who we just talked about his Halloween costume yesterday. He will be up there. By the way, the second he throws a pick and there's a little bit of pressure in his face, someone's going to share that photo.
Of course.
If you aren't thinking of that already as a Atlanta fan, I don't even know what you're doing. Like our guy Aaron Ladd. You might as well just get that meme up and going, my guy.
It's the right decision, though. Taylor Heineke is better than Desmond Ridder. That's what's trending here on Cody and Gold. Earlier today, we caught up with Matt Verderam, national NFL writer for Sports Illustrated. We got into a lot of topics, including about the trade deadline, but he had a featured piece a day or two ago about what occurred on Sunday, and in particular one play, the fumble for Patrick Mahomes, and what he saw on that play and what it says about this wide receiver room.
Yeah, I went back and I watched all 22 of it, mostly to spare the rest of Kansas City. And, I do the piece every week where I kind of run down 3 plays around the league that all were kind of instructive. Excuse me. And so one of them was Mahomes' fumble. And the reason I went back and I looked at that play was because if you watch it, he holds the ball for a while. And then he kind of tries to climb the pocket. He gets strip sacked. And, of course, we turn the ball over. And if you watch, Sky Moore is isolated on the backside of a 3-by-1. He comes open. He actually beat Patrick Surtain, believe it or not, on this in cut, and he's wide open. And at least in the film, I'm not Patrick Mahomes, but it looks like he looks at him, and there's like a moment of hesitation, like, do I want to throw this ball? And then he doesn't do it. And the reason I say that is if you watch the tape, there's a lot of plays like that. And it's not just Sky Moore. It's not. I'm not saying it's everybody. But there's a lot of plays where it's almost you wonder, and you're not in the room. Are guys running at the right depth? Are the route combinations the way they should be? Is this a question of Mahomes in his own mind thinking to himself, can I trust this guy? My guess is it's a combination of all those things to some degree. But that tape on Sunday, listen, I don't think I'm just going to shock anybody. That tape was a horror show. I mean, they looked like they had no interest in being there. Maybe part of that was Mahomes not feeling well, but they really they couldn't have played any worse than they did.
What's funny about them, though, Matt, is now that we know the Chiefs as well as we do, it doesn't here, at least for the two of us, send us into any panic at all. I don't know that there's a better team in the NFL at avoiding this one game turning into 3 out of 4, 3 in a row, like San Francisco's going through right now.
Right.
I just assume the Chiefs will play way better against Miami.
Yeah, it's funny. Right after the game, I went on a podcast, the RNI podcast, and they asked me about some different things. I said, I've never, like, as weird as it sounds, I'm oddly very confident the Chiefs are going to beat Miami this weekend. Like, very confident, because I feel like you're right. Like, we saw them do this last year in that Colts game. And that game was every bit the disaster that this Denver game was. And then they went to Tampa, where they were actually an underdog in the game, and ran the ball down Tampa's throat for 4 straight quarters. And I wonder if we're going to see a very similar type of style of game this week, where the Chiefs basically say, look, we're going to simplify the game. We're going to run the ball more, because Pacheco got 8 carries in the loss to Detroit, and he had 8 carries in the loss to Denver. Every other game this year, he's gotten double-digit carries of 6-0. I think you'll see more for him. I think you're going to start seeing more 2 tight end sets. I think they are going to say, look, if this isn't working, then it's not working. We've got to fix it. Now, they also have a bye week after this Miami game, so I think there's going to be far more introspection even then. But, yeah, the Chiefs, if you look at just about any book in America, they're the Super Bowl favorites. I don't think, as bad as that game was in Denver, you can't throw out the first 7 weeks of the year and just say, well, this is who they are. Well, that's not who they are. They're going to win 12, 13, 14 games. I mean, it's who they've been for years. And as bad as the passing game has looked at times, they're third in the league in passing yardage. I mean, their biggest problem is they can't stop turning the ball over. They've only had one game this year where they haven't had a turnover, and that was against Minnesota. That's the problem that they've got to correct far more than anything in the passing game.
And Matt, yesterday, a lot of people around Kansas City were hoping and believing that they needed to go out and make a trade. We know they didn't do anything. They didn't even trade away Richie James. Right. There was some reports that maybe that was going to be in play. And I think none of us, at least in this room, were surprised they didn't make a move based off of their cap situation. And also, look around the league, man. Only one wide receiver got traded yesterday. It was Donovan Peoples-Jones.
Yeah, I had talked to somebody pretty much right after the Hardman trade, with the Chiefs, and tried to get an understanding of the mindset. Is this the first of a few moves? Is this the only move? And the response is essentially, look, you never know what's going to happen, but this might be it. I mean, and the reality is the Chiefs don't have a lot of cap space. They don't have their full complement of picks next year. And this team is built in a way that they are relying on what is right now, you can make a really strong argument, a top 3 defense in football, and a quarterback who's great. I mean, the Chiefs basically look at this team right now and go, all right, listen, we know the receivers are a problem. We understand that. And I would expect next year MVS is not going to be there. I don't know that Sky Moore is going to be there. We'll see about some of these other guys. But I think if you're the Chiefs, you know it, you're aware of it, but they were never going to go out and do some Madden trade for Terry McLaurin. That was never happening. This isn't fantasy land as much as I think sometimes fans would love it to be. Like, they're not. If they were going to do anything yesterday, it was going to be a smaller. Hey, look, man, we're going to try to bring in a Darnell Mooney. We're going to try to bring in a guy who's maybe got a real low salary. But even then, they would have had to give up more picks. So if they had gotten a trade for Richie James, then maybe they would have. Maybe they would have taken that pick and flipped it. But they couldn't. They didn't. And the result is they have a team that they have figured out. They've got a couple of months for the playoffs, which we all know they're going to be in. And, what do they look like by the time New Year rolls around?
I want to ask you inside their own division in just a minute on the Raiders, Matt, but the Falcons just made a change at quarterback as well. And I think it's fascinating more so than even the Raiders, because we get that. The Falcons are technically in first place in their division right now, and even they're saying Ritter's not the guy. One, that's just super not common, as you well know, but is Taylor Heineke a massive upgrade over Ritter?
He's better than Ritter. I don't know I'd say he's massive, but he's at least a definitive upgrade. Ritter has done nothing this year to show that he can play the position at a high level. And so Heineke, well, he's also never been a guy that you look at and go, hey, MVP candidate. Like, he's He's capable. He's been in a playoff game. He actually played okay in that game. You know, I think if you're Atlanta, look, let's face it. This is the third year with Arthur Smith. They don't win this division, he's probably gone. Like, you've got to win this division. Carolina's a tire fire, and Tampa Bay's not any good. And New Orleans is probably the more talented team, but they can't ever really seem to get going. Part of that might be Dennis Allen. Part of that's Carr. But, yeah, I think if you're Atlanta, you got to win. For the Raiders, you know, it's funny, actually. On Monday night, I was assigned that game for Sports Illustrated, and I was talking to my editor throughout the game. I said, look, I want to write a column. They really should just fire McDaniels and bench Garoppolo because this is going nowhere. And then we both kind of laughed. We're like, well, yeah, it's probably like a little too early to write that column. Well, as it turns out, should have wrote the column.
Well, now you can write the column about him being fired.
Yeah, he got fired and Garoppolo got benched, and here we are. So I just trust my instincts. But the point is with the Raiders, look, this has been a cycle for 20 years. This is what they do. In fact, it's really been a cycle for about 30 years. I mean, this is what they do. They hire guys. They profess he's the answer. It's clearly not the answer within like a month of the hiring. The quarterback is just a disaster other than Gannon, they've not had a quarterback that you've looked at and thought he is an upper echelon guy for 30 years. Carr had moments, but they're in a spot now you do wonder after the season, do they just trade Max Crosby? Do they trade Devonta Adams? Do they just completely tear this thing down to the studs and get picks? Because, frankly, that's probably what they ought to do.
Were you surprised at the timing of it? I know you were going to writing a column, or we're going to write a column Monday night, but that the GM firing came after the trade deadline. I think some people are like, well, why wouldn't you do it before and then trade guys? Or do you think that was the final straw that, hey, maybe there was some directive from ownership that, hey, you need to either not, you know, you need to make some moves and they didn't? What do you think the timing was there?
You know, I don't know if it had anything to do with the deadline. I just think it had to do with that they were so embarrassing in Detroit. And you started to see with Adams the frustration. Jacobs talking about, hey, man, it's not my job to fix the offense. And look, I mean, ultimately, we didn't write the column because we didn't think the timing was right. And so, you know, obviously, I was a little bit surprised. I wasn't surprised in the sense that, this was inevitable. They had to move on. But I did think, you know, 3-5, they might wait to get the Giants this weekend. If you probably get the 4-5 and kind of figure it out. But my big thing with the Raiders now is whoever comes in as the GM, whoever comes in as the next coach, and Jim Harbaugh is going to be a name everybody hears, but Jim Harbaugh is going to have more than a few offers in the NFL. So the Raiders are going to have to entice him in a way another team doesn't. The Bears, who he played for, you look at and go, they're going to come calling. Okay, I don't think that's any big secret. If you're the Raiders, what do you do with this current roster? Like I just mentioned, you have Adams, you have Crosby. Jacobs is a free agent after this year. I can't imagine they're giving him a huge money deal after the season he's having. Like, do you sit there and say, you know what, we need as much young draft capital, you know, young players from that draft capital that we can get? Do you trade Adams for a 1 and a 2? Do you trade Crosby for a 1 and a 3? Maybe even one of those guys nets you 2 firsts for the right team. Like, I think you probably do. I mean, by the time they're a contending team, Devonta Adams is going to be 57 years old at this rate. Like, you need to get better with young guys, and those are the only 2 pieces they have. They're not trading anybody else who's going to bring back any kind of return.
So McDaniels is out. Like, who's the next coach that should be worried right now? If there's another in-season firing.
I mean, Rivera seems like the guy that might be on the hot seat in a sense. Washington clearly, under new ownership, and first of all, anytime there's new ownership, you always kind of raise an eyebrow and pay attention to that because Josh Harris had nothing to do with hiring Ron Rivera. I'm looking there and saying, okay, this might be where they just say we're moving on, and maybe part of that is because they want to give Eric Bieniemy an interim look. Hey, you know what? Here's 4 games. Here's 6 games. Show me what you look like as a head coach. Let's see it. I mean, I think that makes a ton of sense. As far as I know, a lot of people are going to look at the Chargers. I just think the Chargers are going to give her to Staley after the season. But the Chargers have historically been a team. They kind of just waited out. They usually don't do that in the middle of the year. So I think Staley's gone. I just think it's going to happen tomorrow. I think Rivera, of all the guys, Eberflus is another one, but the Bears are such a conservative ownership group. I think they'll probably wait to the end of the year. I could see Washington moving on to try to make a statement to their fans while giving Bieniemy a shot to kind of show what he can do.
Speaking of Matt Verderame, NFL staff writer for Sports Illustrated, I want to ask you about Miami at least. I feel like there's still kind of a mixed opinion on Miami in the NFL community. Nobody's doubting that they can score and that Tyreek Hill is incredible. But this stat of them not beating a winning team since early last year keeps coming up. People who seriously question their defensive ability. How good do you think Miami is as it relates to the Chiefs?
I think they're good. And I think they're very dangerous. I don't think they're as good as Kansas City. The problem I think Miami has and runs into against good teams is good teams this year, and by those I mean Buffalo and Philadelphia, who have been the teams they've played. They haven't just beaten the Dolphins; they've beat them up. I mean, they have physically just taken it to the Dolphins in these games. Kansas City, I would imagine, especially on the defensive front, that is going to be the game plan here. It is going to be a look. Do whatever you possibly can to limit Tyreek Hill, which of course is a tall order, and then just physically get downhill and get after that offensive line, which has been beat up, get after Tua. The Dolphins have been incredible offensively at times this year. They've also had games where they've really kind of struggled through it. I mean, not even just the losses. There have been times, the Giants game, they ended up scoring their points, but they had a lot of turnovers. Even in this past week, they had multiple turnovers, but New England just couldn't do anything, kept giving the ball back to them. I think in the end, if Miami's going to win this game, they're going to have to do something defensively with Kelsey, and I think to slow Pacheco down, because I think in this game Pacheco's going to be a huge factor. If Miami can turn this into, hey, you're going to have to throw against Xavier Howard and Jalen Ramsey and Javon Holland, then I think all of a sudden the advantage swings to the Dolphins. But if Kansas City can kind of play the game in the middle of the field, they can play at the line of scrimmage, the Chiefs are just, they're better there. They're better on both sides of the ball in the trenches. That's where Kansas City, I think, has a big advantage. It's where Philly beat them. It's where Buffalo beat them. And I think the Chiefs are going to try to replicate that.
Matt Verderam, NFL staff writer for Sports Illustrated. Great to have you on the show again, man. Appreciate the insight.
No problem. Anytime.
So that was Matt Verderam a little bit earlier today talking about the NFL trade deadline, where he sees the Chiefs at offensively, and, of course, Sunday morning in Germany when the Chiefs take on the Dolphins, how he sees that one playing out. And he has the same question that a lot of people do about the Dolphins. And they have a chance to prove it. On Sunday, it's just like, hey, you haven't really played well against those teams we all consider to be contenders. And I agree with it. Now, they have everything in front of them still. Like, they have a chance to crush that narrative beginning on Sunday. But I think that is something to keep in mind, is how the Dolphins have fared against the teams we consider to be big AFC or NFC contenders. And they look like a completely different team. They look outclassed at times against those teams.
They do, and I guess that's what will be the question here going into this game. Some of this just comes back to what we said in the earlier going. I just don't see very often the Chiefs play two games in which they are out of competition. We've given the stats hundreds of times on this show. The Chiefs are only losing by double digits at the end of a football game, a tiny fraction of their entire existence with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. They're always in it, Gold. So no matter whether Miami's offense is there or those things, I don't expect Kansas City to get blown out. If you tell me which is more likely on Sunday, it is more likely the Chiefs blow out the Miami Dolphins than the other way around. And I know Miami's offense, and I know Miami can drop 70 and all the things that they've done this year offensively. But if you're saying what's a more likely blowout scenario, it's that the Chiefs do it to Miami because of what they've done consistently over the course of this time. I also, by the way, there's only one answer for who's getting fired next, and it's Ron Rivera.
Yeah, I still don't know if they're going to do it in season. I had it all 32 a week ago, I think. And I said they should fire him in season and do exactly what Verderam was saying. Let Eric Bieniemy be the interim head coach and see what he's got. Most likely, I think the ownership group is going to bring in a brand new GM and a new head coach outside the organization. Heck, they might even change the nickname again and completely just start fresh.
That's weird. They'd have like four names.
But it's not their problem. They didn't
10
come up.
years.
But it's not. By the way, nobody's attached to the Commander's name, though.
No, honestly, the Washington football team was better.
Good. It was good.
You should have stayed there.
Nobody's attached to the
Commander's
name. And this ownership group, they're not the ones that changed it the last time. I'm not saying they're not going back. I can promise you that. They're not going back to what it was before. But, yeah, I think they're going to potentially change everything in the offseason.
What are they going to change their name? A color scheme?
The Generals.
They got to keep the color scheme, don't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they're going to keep the
That is an incredibly
maroon.
well-known color scheme. At the very least,
time, it like Red Hawks, Red Tails.
Red Tails,
were a
I think, is
couple of
nice.
them that came up that people really liked.
I did like that one better than Commanders was not at the top of the list of potential options.
Red Hogs fits the pig.
History.
Yeah. All that stuff.
I don't know anybody, though. Like, is there a single professional sports team named after a pig?
No, but that's the point,
Is
right?
there, is there one?
That fits.
Arkansas Razorbacks?
You're talking about for college teams. Yeah, that'd be the one. Yep, that's a good one.
That's it, though, right?
I think so.
We got any other? Is there,
Isn't there's a minor league baseball team that's the
minor league.
the Iron Pigs or I think
minor league teams probably have.
They all have
crazy
crazy
names.
You're gonna find at least one or two.
they like to have crazy gear so that you're willing to buy it.
Oh yeah.
This Iron Pigs logo, it's just like a steel made, just an iron made pig. That's it. You're like, oh, who knew? Who could have seen this coming?
I mean, we used to have the
Valley.
T-Bones here, Drew. Then
Yeah,
they
we
changed
did.
to the Monarchs, but it used to be the minor league baseball team was the T-Bones.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Nice.
nice steak.
Ruby has a T-Bones jersey.
Oh yeah, we've all went to T-Bones games back in
T-Bones
the day.
sleeveless jersey still doesn't fit her.
Still doesn't fit her?
No, so it wasn't purchased. It was given to me by the T-Bones when we were promoting a Jorts night when Mahomes was seen at the.
Yep.
He was seen at a Kansas Speedway race. He was wearing cutoff jorts and a T-Bones sleeveless jersey. So I
NASCAR
dressed
right there.
So
That's
I
all.
dressed my daughter up in the jersey, and it's still just sitting in the closet. It's
Gotcha.
like three
That's great.
sizes too big.
Someone
still.
says there's the Ice Hogs,
not even their
which
name
are an
anymore.
AHL team.
Nice.
The Ice Hogs.
Okay, so they would be in a very limited company of pig-related
Turns out.
signage. Okay. Well, I don't care what they go
there
with.
were- there
Commander
were-
stinks, so I guess if they change it, it's
Yeah,
fine.
there were a lot better directions they could have gone than Commanders. But the Washington D.C. thing, they want to tie it into that. I'm sure somehow, some way.
The Washington Feral Hogs. That's a old popular did we talk about that on this show? Is that
think
older
so.
than this show?
I don't know if we've talked about it on
The
this show.
Feral Hogs
What
problem?
is that?
I don't know if we did that or
That
not.
was a whole big internet sensation. You don't remember that? 1,000 feral hogs or whatever it was? Oh my god.
Escaped?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that was our trash of the day or a previous show, Cody. I'm not sure.
I couldn't remember how old that story was. I couldn't decide if the feral hog story was old enough to be this show or not. Now they're just asking for more fantasies on the text line.
Coming up-
6. What's your guys' fantasy?
Coming
I
up
showed you mine.
tomorrow. Coming up tomorrow. Dane Hughes going to join us before he makes the trip out to Germany. We'll get some fantasy football from Paul Charchian, and we'll have a conversation with Daniel, we think, Jensen?
I believe it's Jensen.
Daniel Jensen of Das Kingdom.
We went straight to Germany for this one.
That's
gonna be
tomorrow
great.
on the show. I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to having him on the show. I want to get the perspective on what's it like to watch Chiefs football in Germany and what's going to go on all weekend long there in Frankfurt. So that's coming up tomorrow on the show. Up next, though, of course, it's The Drive with C-Dot and Rob right here on 610 Sports Radio.